Today on GBA-Z, we're going to look at 5 run and gun games for the Game Boy Advance. But before we do, let's define exactly what a run and gun game is. I personally like Eric Voll's definition from the site onemorecastle.com, which says,
Run and gun refers to a horizontal, side-scrolling game, not a top-down game. The player can aim and shoot in different directions, usually 8. Platforming and exploration can be in the game, but aren't the focus of the game, so no Earthworm Jim. It has to basically be a beat-em-up, but with guns.
Now let's take a look at the games. Lilo & Stitch is based off of the 2002 Disney movie of the same name. This game gives us a variety of different genres throughout the course of its playthrough. Stitch's main levels are run and gun based. There is only one main weapon for Stitch, but collecting prisms will give you 50 special shots. These shots not only do more damage, but they are also able to go through objects. Stitch's sub-weapon is a grenade, and collecting pineapples increases your grenade arsenal by 1. The biggest complication in this section of the game is not being able to shoot while crouching. The next level type revolves around Lilo and is what I call a trial and error game. One of the best examples of the genre is the game Out of This World. This is a format that you will either love or hate because you will die repeatedly and replay the same part over and over until you completely figure it out. Lilo can climb, hide, attack, and sneak to get to the end of the level. Finding your way through initially will take a while, but once you've memorized the correct path, you will fly through it without missing a beat. The third set of levels have you flying a ship in a vertical shoot 'em up. You just shoot your way through the destructible enemies and avoid the indestructible ones as you survive through the level. Because the ship rotates on a looped track, the L and R buttons function to make the ship's movement easier. Any level beaten in the game without dying also awards you 5,000 extra points. Lilo & Stitch may be considered the most noob game in this video, but it's still entertaining, innovative, and fun. From Stitch's standing to Lilo's climbing and her ridiculously funny and quite fluid sneaking walk cycle, the animations are done very well here. Don't get me wrong, this game will have you at your wit's end at times, especially when Stitch is unable to shoot while crouching, but overall it does more right than it does wrong. This game does rock the password system though, but it is symbol based and not very complicated. On a side note, I put this password in completely randomly to record footage and somehow it actually was a level's password. Lilo & Stitch can be found in bargain bins everywhere, but still deserves a playthrough and a spot in your GBA collection. Alienator's Evolution Continues is based off of the 2001 animated TV series of the same name, which is based off of the 2001 movie titled Evolution. This is the one game in the video that at times falls out of the run and gun definition. Sometimes it's a full-on, long level of straight-up running and gunning with less emphasis on platforming and climbing, while other times it's the exact opposite. There are multiple weapon types to pick up and use throughout the level, including a machine gun and a spread shot. Grenades are also used as a secondary weapon here. You cycle through your weapons with the select button, throw a grenade with the L button, and plant your character in place to shoot in 8 directions with the R button. One thing you'll need to get used to is the crouch mechanic, because once you are crouched, you'll stay in that position until you stand back up or you jump. You'll have a mission to accomplish in all of the levels before you are able to advance to the next one. Sometimes it's finding all of the key cards, and sometimes it's killing a certain amount of enemies. The question remains of whether this is a run and gun game or not. Honestly, it seems like a game that incorporates multiple types of games into the final product, but overall this has enough components for me to be put into the run and gun genre. There's platforming like wall hanging that is very similar to the mechanic in Cyberlip. There's also no fall damage in the game. Also, no matter if you're standing, crouching, climbing, or hanging, you always can use the R button to plant your character and shoot in 8 directions for total control of your shots. I mean, look at the main character here. He's literally running and gunning. Evolution Continues has a nice, light, and funny comic art style that doesn't seem to take itself too seriously. The graphics are great and the colors really pop in this game. Like Lilo & Stitch, this game also uses a password system. This time it's alphabet based, but is still not cryptic enough to become detrimental to the game. Alienator's Evolution Continues is a game I don't ever hear anyone talking about, but is one that I personally like and find myself going back to play often. The controls are tight, the game looks great, it's very inexpensive, and whether this actually fits into the genre or not, it's still fun to play. You would think Tarak Evolution would be a first-person shooter to fall in with the rest of the series, but you'd be wrong. What you have here is a 16-bit styled run-and-gun game. You pick one of two playable characters and shoot your way through the levels doing whatever it takes to get to the exit. Tapping the B button shoots while running, holding the B button plants the character and lets you shoot in 8 directions, LNR cycle through your available weapons, and pressing LNR simultaneously calls in another character who performs an AoE attack. When using your melee weapon to kill baddies, you can also charge it up to do more damage, or use it to grab ledges and swing to otherwise inaccessible areas. Watch out though, because you can very easily find yourself plummeting to your death. Tarak Evolution also rides the innovation train by having multiple level types as you progress through the game. I get a very strong SNK influence vibe while playing this. The main focus of kicking ass and taking names has a Metal Slug feel to it. Later levels have a Nam 1975 feel. And there's some ladder climbing and platforming in between, for some reason just reminds me of Magician Lord. By far one of the coolest features in the game is being able to play it 2-player co-op. If you have 2 GBAs, 2 copies of the game, and a link cable, you can play through the campaign with a friend, a stranger, or a romantic interest. Once again, this game uses a password system that is more complex than the previously mentioned ones, but is still easier to use than the one from River City Ransom. Although Tarak Evolution will greatly anger you at times, it's a well-made game that not only looks great, but plays great too. The game is cheap, and it's a must-have for any GBA collection. Metal Slug has been a big name in the run-and-gun genre since the 90s, and versions of it have been released across a slew of consoles over the years. It has a tried-and-true formula that just simply holds up. The game always stuck out to me for 2 reasons. First of all, its over-the-top, insane animation, boasting beautiful and crisp visuals. It not only shows off the game's humor, but it gives it a lot of charm in the process. This was originally an arcade game, so it had to be able to draw people in quickly and take as many quarters of them as possible off of its look and sound alone. The second is the close combat melee attack that gets used when an enemy is too close to shoot. That little knife stab makes the game feel much more fluid and sets it apart from other games in its group. There are 2 things that you should notice immediately about the GBA version. The first is that we have 2 new characters in the game. The old cast is out, and Walter and Tyra are in. The second is that we have a health bar now, so no more one-hit kills in the game. Also, added to the advanced version is collectibles. There are 100 different cards to collect and 100 different prisoners to rescue. Some cards are just for aesthetics, while others do affect your game when used. Some cards are awarded after completing levels, some are given by rescuing prisoners, and some are hidden throughout the game. Die with any collected cards or prisoners before finishing the level, and you lose them. Metal Slug at its core is a great game, and that's why its transition to a handheld plays just as great as it did in the arcade. The console might be small, but the bosses and vehicles are still big. There's enough added here to make the game feel fresh and keep you coming back for multiple playthroughs. There are many games in the series now, and this one is just as good as the others. There's not much more to say here. It's Metal Slug, and it's on the Game Boy Advance. Treasure is one of my all-time favorite game developers, but when it comes to their library, there are some titles that are always talked about and some that I don't ever hear anyone mention. After being completely blown away by this game, I looked at a dozen best of GBA lists from top 10 to top 25 to top 100 to see where this game was landing for other people, and not one of them even had this game on their list. Gunstar Superheroes is one of the most beautiful and technically impressive achievements ever created for the Game Boy Advance, and it's also a whole lot of fun. With such modest amount of buttons on the GBA, this game takes it to the max with putting them to use. Tapping B will do a melee attack, while holding B will shoot your main weapon. L selects your weapon type, and R uses your special. A jumps. Jumping and pressing A second time does a flying sidekick. Jumping next to a wall and pressing A second time does a wall jump. Up and A does an uppercut. While in the air, A and down does a ground stomp. While on the ground, A and down does a slide attack. And finally, while on a platform, A and down allows you to drop through. Once again, we have a game adding innovation with different genres during the ride. The game itself is a fast-paced run and gun. We also have shoot-'em-up stages, on-rail shooter stages, and this weird stage that I'm not sure what to call it, but it looks really cool. All of the stages have nice big end bosses that are so satisfying to beat up. If you're a fan of the original Gunstar heroes, you will notice some throwbacks peppered throughout the game, as well as some modernization to allow this game to stand on its own. It's insane to me that this game does not have any slowdown, while a game like the Sonic the Hedgehog port does. It makes me think Sonic was ported to the GBA by a hamster in a plastic bag. Like Metal Slug, this game does not require a password system. It'll save all of your data for Gunstar Red and Gunstar Blue throughout all of the difficulty levels. There's not much more that I want to say about Gunstar Superheroes because I want everyone to go out and play this as soon as possible. You won't be disappointed. What other GBA run and gun games do you like? What other types of Game Boy Advance videos would you like to see? Leave a comment to let me know, and as always, stay nerdy.
Getting your nerd on, getting your nerd on, getting your nerd on.
I got a raging nerd on.